Huh?
Okay.
Because the cricket's going very well for us at the moment. Now, the Italians are shaking their heads, but as we're beating India quite well at the moment, we all want to talk about the cricket, okay? We're thinking, John, we're building a statue of Joe Root.
Right, Mike. Stop wittering for a minute. Let me announce the deal, and then I'm going to pass over to you. Right. Ladies and gentlemen, an assembled company, welcome to the World Storytelling Cafe, and in conjunction with Get a Word on Edgeways, let's get that right for a second, we have the worldwide story round. It's really worldwide tonight. Actually, it's a really good international cast. And so I'm passing over to the MC for the night, Mr. Mike Rust. Over to you,
Mike. Hello. Right, so we'll go for a batting order. We're going to start off with David because he needs to go and do something. And then we'll take it as it comes. So is that Rachel? Oh, hello, Rachel. I've just seen you come in. Hello. Right, so we'll go David first. I'll go second, and then we'll go to Michael. So David, me, then Michael Flaherty, and then we'll take it from there.
And we'll go. If we can get Aman on fairly early because it's very late in India.
What time is it, Aman, over there? What time is it?
It's 11:30 p.m.
Right. So we'll go David, Aman Preet.
Yes.
So you go second. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. That'd be great. And there's Colin. Right. So, and we're just, as we always do, where everybody will get a chance to do something. It's a spoken word, so you can do stories, you can do songs, you can do anything you like as far as we're concerned tonight. Even sit there and eat your collie. Is that Rice Krispies? Is it, Rachel?
It's slightly superior to that, Mike, I have to say.
Oh, is it? Oh, Cocoa Pops.
Well, yeah, but of a non-Nestle variety.
That's great. People are still coming in, so we'll give it a moment or so. Hello, Norman. How are you doing, mate?
I'm doing all right. I just found out about this. I got off of Marin's efforts, and I'm greedy for stories. So here I am.
Great. It's lovely to see you again. We've got snow over here. Have you got snow over there?
It's still on the ground in patches. But we've been snow free. Well, Canada's reputation is taking a shredding for least ways in Toronto. I know there's lots of snow elsewhere.
Well, we got a bit in the UK that always. If you get snow in London, then the whole world stops because all the journalists they all panic and everything else. Yeah. So, okay.
David,
so they're back. Oh, he's gone now.
He's gone. He's gone. We've got hello, Manuela.
Hello, John. Hi.
Hello, Manuela. Hello, Manuela. Yes.
Hi, Mike.
And Colin's there from Ireland. Right. So the batting order is going to start off with David, Amanpreet. Then I'll do a short one. Then Mike. Has anybody got to go early or anything like that? To anybody apart from the people who told me? Laura?
Can I be the fourth one?
You can be the fourth one. We'll be the third one. Number 3. Okay? So the batting order now is David, Amanpreet, Laura. Okay? And then we'll probably go to you, Mike, is staying at number 4. Okay, so away you go, David. If you get started.
Hello, everyone. I learned this story from a teenage girl called Avia Mopal, or Avia Mopal, I should say. And Avia Mopal lives in Nepal. So this is a Nepali story. Once, there was an old man, a wise old man. He had great power, but he lived a simple life in a simple hut in the mountains. One day, the old man was cleaning outside his house when he saw a little mouse, and the mouse was hungry. The wise old man gave some grain to the mouse, and the mouse came into the house. and he and the mouse were friends. But one day, the mouse was outside among the trees looking for something to eat when the mouse heard a meow. And there was a cat, and the mouse was frightened. The cat chased the little mouse into the hut, and the little mouse cried to the wise old man, "Help me!" The wise old man took some water and sprinkled the water on the mouse, and the mouse became a cat. The cat felt strong. The cat was confident. Now I'm a cat. No one will hurt me. The cat prowled near the house, near that little hut among the trees. But as the cat was prowling there among the trees, the cat heard woof, woof, and there was a dog coming. Oh, the dog barked and snarled at the cat, and the cat was frightened and ran quickly into the little hut where the wise old man lived. "Help me, meow!" Well, the wise old man took some water and sprinkled the water over the cat, and everybody can join in because you know what happened. The cat turned into a dog. Well, the dog felt confident and strong. The dog wandered through the trees and even as far as the lake between the mountains. No one can hurt me. But you can be sure that soon that dog heard a great roar, and there appeared a tiger. The tiger raced towards the dog, ready to catch the dog. The dog was frightened and ran swiftly across the mountains, through the forest, to the little hut where the wise old man was. The dog ran inside the little hut. "Help me!" Woof, woof. The wise old man took some water and sprinkled the water over the dog, and the dog turned into a
Tiger.
tiger. Oh, no one can hurt me. The tiger went out through the trees, through the mountains, and drank from the lake. I am the mighty tiger. No one can harm me. But you know, tigers have a great hunger, and the tiger needed food. I know where I can get an easy meal. And the tiger returned through the trees to the little hut. And into the hut the tiger came, and there was the wise old man. "Wise old man, I am stronger than you. Now I'm going to eat you." And the tiger leapt into the air. Well, the wise old man took what was left of his water and he threw the water over the tiger. And you know, the tiger turned into a
elephant.
Mouse.
Mouse.
little mouse.
Mouse.
Oh, mouse. Okay.
Mouse.
A little mouse. And I can tell you that went the little mouse. The little mouse has run, and my tale is done. But I ask you, I wonder what happened to that little mouse and that wise old man. I wonder.
Well, I guess we'll never know. So
That's for Avia Mopal, who told me that story, a 14-year-old girl from Nepal. Thank you, Avia.
Nepal. Ah, right. Thank you very much. Well, I've just changed all the microphones around on my computer, so hopefully you're hearing me better now. Is that right? Where's John? Can you hear me okay? If you can hear me, will you please wave? Great. Great. We're having some problem. We're having technical issues this end. That was all. Right. So
you're very good, Michael. You're incredibly clear.
Great. Great. We've just had to switch it all about. Anyway, you don't want to hear about my problems there. I'm going to go to Amanpreet from the Punjab, which is in India, and we're not talking about the cricket. She's told me that already. Okay, because she probably doesn't follow cricket. So tell us a little bit about
True. A bit. I see. Namaste.
So tell me a bit more. Tell us a bit more about yourself first. You're obviously still at school, so.
I'm working as a teacher in a school, right?
We would never have guessed.
So I'm going to start my now I'm going to start my story. Namaste and hello everyone. So I'm so excited to be here. As my daughter Jasname every week tells the story, right? And David and John knows that. So this is my very first time at the cafe. So today I'm going to tell you a small short story named Smart Kid. So I'm going to start the story. Many times we waste time and energy in finding our own things. So this is because we do not keep things at right place, and later we waste time looking around for them. If we choose to be organized, our life will be under control and we will save a lot of time. So here, a child named Rehan. This is a story of a smart kid named Rehan. One day, Rehan was late for school. His teacher, Miss Paul, asked him, "Why are you late for school, Rehan?" Rehan said, "Teacher, I could not find my pencil box this morning. I searched for it here and there for a long time in my house. After 2 hours, at last I found it on my brother's bed." So this was his answer. That day, the teacher accepted his answer. A few days later, Rehan was again late for school. This time, he told a funny story. He said, "Teacher, I could not find my shoes this morning. I searched for them in every corner of my house." "Where did you find the shoes then?" asked Miss Paul. "Teacher, I found one under the bed and other one on the top of the cupboard," replied Rehan. So Miss Paul asked, "How did the shoes come to be in the wrong place?" Rehan answered, "Last night I went out for dinner with my family. We returned late. I kicked my shoes off too hard. One of them dropped under the bed and the other fell on the top of the cupboard." Rehan explained to his teacher. The whole class started laughing loudly. Ha 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 ha, ha 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 ha. Rehan was ashamed of himself, and Miss Paul called Rehan and said, "Rehan, this is not a good habit. You should learn to be organized. You must keep your things at proper place before you go to bed. Your bag, your books, your shoes, and pencil box must be ready before you go to sleep. In this way, you will not waste your time searching here and there for them in the morning." Before coming to school, Rehan and his classmate learned an important lesson on being organized. They understood that if they keep things at the right place, they'll not waste the time searching for them. It is important to plan and prepare for our day in advance. It saves time and makes the day more fruitful. Thank you, everyone. This was the story.
It's taken me 73 years and I'm still not organized.
Thank you so much.
That is a very good story for a festival organizer. It really is, and I'm sure that it will get used again lots of times. But I'd forget to put my head on if it wasn't screwed on some mornings. I really would.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So stay as long as you like. It's there's no rules, hard and fast rules, but we'd love to see you and put your feet up and have a cup of tea and do what you normally do at this time of night in your country. And if it gets too late, just quietly fade away. But thank you very much for being here, and we have appreciated your voice. Thank you very much. Okay.
I shall tell you, Yasnami, that you actually turned up. And because every week your daughter entertains us and tells us a great story. And for weeks you've been promising. But now I can tell your daughter that you actually came.
Right. Brilliant.
True.
Hope to see you.
Yes.
And we hope to see you in 2 weeks' time. In 2 weeks' time, we'll all be here again. So if you want to come in 2 weeks' time and tell us a different story or a poem or something, or some of the poems from the Surfi poets that are from the Punjab, who are very famous worldwide and things. Anything you like, okay? Well, we're going to Laura next, and after Laura, we're going to Mike Flaherty. Okay.
Thank you, Aman, because I know, because for me to tell in English is very challenging. So you're a wonderful teller. I will try to tell that story in English, and it will be a folk tale from southern Italy, my favorite one. Okay. And this is a story of a princess who doesn't care about silken dress and dancing party and jewels. The only things she likes to do is cooking. And she spends all the time in the royal kitchen making fabulous dishes. But his father was a widow and he was waiting for an heir. So he asked her to marry. But she said, "Father, I will marry only a husband that I can make by my own hands." So she asked her father, 10,000 bag of flour and 10,000 bag of sugar. She closed herself in her rooms and she started to knead. And she kneaded for 6 months. And she shaped her husband for other 6 months. But when she finished, she doesn't like what she did. So she make it for 6 months and she remake it for other 6 months. And at the end, what she saw was beautiful. And she fall in love for him instantly. "Oh, you are so beautiful," she said. "I will call you King Pepper." And she take a hot chili pepper and she put it in the middle of his face to make lips. And King Pepper had wonderful, beautiful red lips. And she ran to his father and asked him, Father, can't you see my fiancé?" And the king said, "Yes, your fiancé is gorgeous, but he doesn't speak." "He will speak," said the princess. And from that day, every morning and every evening before to go to bed, they said to King Pepper, "Oh, King Pepper made by hand, sugar sweet and flour of wheat, 6 months to knead you, 6 months to shape you, 6 months to unmake you, 6 months to remake you. 6 months here all alone. Now you are speaking on your own. Every day and every night she was saying that. And after 6 months, really, King Pepper started to speak. He was making sense. And he talked a lot with the princess, and she called again for his father, and he had a good talk also with the king, and he asked for the princess' hand. And in 2 days, they were happily married. And they were so happy and so in love that they didn't exit at all from the royal chambers. And the king was worried for that, and he told to his daughter, please, go take a walk with your husband. It's for your health. So the princess with the King Pepper agreed to have a walk in the royal carriage. And they went outside, and they had a nice day. And when they arrived in a place where they can see all the fields and the sea far away, King Pepper decided to go on foot. He descended from the royal carriage, but just in that moment, a rush of wind take him away. No, cried the princess, no, but King Pepper was gone. The princess came back to the palace and closed herself in her room, crying and crying. And what about King Pepper? The royal carriage was followed by a lady. That lady was called the Lady Starved Dog. She was beautiful, but she was exhausted by diet. And when she saw King Pepper, so sweet, so delicious, so tasty, floating in the air, she called him, putting in her carriage and bring him to her palace. And meanwhile, the princess was crying in her room. But one day she stopped to cry, and she decided to go looking for her beloved husband. She went out of the palace, and she started to walk and walk and walk and walk. And one evening, she came at the hut in the forest. She knocked at the door and opened an old man, so old that his beard is to the belly. And he let her enter, and she told him all the story. He said, I can give you an advice to how to find your husband, but I can give you that almond. You can break it when you will in need, when you will be in need. But you can go one day walk from here. You can find the hut on my older brother. He is wiser than me. You can ask him for a good advice to how to find your husband. And the princess, the morning, went and walked for one day, and in the evening she arrived at the hut of the other father. She knocked at the door, and that old man had the bird to his knees. To that man, again, she told her story. And the old man said, I can't give you any kind of advice to how to find your husband, but I can give you that hazelnut. You can break it when you will be in need. And one day walk from my house, you can find the house of our older brother. He is the wisest of us all. He can give you an advice to you. The princess said, thank you, and walked and walked and walked and walked and walked for one day. And she arrived at the hut of the third brother, and the brother let her enter, and she again told all her story. I know where your husband is, said the third brother. Lady Starved Dog called him, and now she is living with him like if he was her husband. Yes, you have to bring your husband home, and to do that, I will bring you that hazelnut that you can broke when you will be in need. How can I be in need of all that nuts? Because they are magic. I have to go to the palace, to the Lady Starved Dog, and pretending to have something to sell, something very precious to sell. And the bargain will be that you ask not for money, but to spend a night with King Pepper. But what I have nothing to sell. But in the nuts, said the old man. Oh, girl, please, in the nuts you can find something very precious to sell. So the princess proudly went to the city, went under the window of Lady Starved Dog, and broke the almond. And from the almond came a golden horse with a golden mane and a golden knight. Who wants to buy a golden horse with a golden mane, with a golden knight? Lady Starved Dog here, and she was so greedy that she summoned the girl in her palace, and she asked what it will be the price for that horse. No money, madam. I want to spend a night with King Pepper. Lady Starved Dog was puzzled, but meanwhile she was still so greedy that she agreed. But that evening, she put sleeping powder in the wine of the poor King Pepper. So when the princess entered the room, she found King Pepper laying still. And she started to call him and to weep and to call, please, please, oh, King Pepper made by hand, sugar sweet and flour of wheat. 6 months to knead you, 6 months to shape you, 6 months to unmake you, 6 months to remake you, 6 months all alone, and now you're speaking on your own. Nothing at all, because King Pepper was still laying completely asleep. And in the morning, the poor princess had to leave the palace. But she again went under the window of Lady Starved Dog, and she broke the hazelnut. And from the hazelnut came out a beautiful golden girl who was embroidering golden leaf. Who wants to buy a golden girl who is embroidering golden leaf? Lady Starved Dog was so greedy, and she again summoned the princess to his palace. And again, they made the same bargain. And again, that evening, Lady Starved Dog put sleeping powder in King Pepper wine. And again, the poor princess found his beloved husband completely asleep. Oh, she started again to cry and to cry. King pepper made by hand, sugar sweet and flour of wheat, 6 months to knead you, 6 months to shape you, 6 months to unmake you, 6 months to remake you, 6 months waiting all along, and now you are speaking on your own. Not at all. The mouth of King Pepper was shut, and he can speak a word because he was sleeping and sleeping and sleeping. And in the morning, again, the princess left the palace. But that morning, when King Pepper woke up and go for a walk, he was summoned by the prisoner that were caught in prison, and the prison was just under King Pepper's room. And that poor prison, they didn't sleep for two completely night because they were listening to that princess crying and crying. And they said to King Pepper, "Oh, Your Majesty, there is a woman who cried for all the night saying, King Pepper here, King Pepper there, I made you, you made you. Oh, please, you can do something. We want to sleep." And suddenly, King Pepper understand that she was his princess, his wife, and that he couldn't hear her because Lady Starvedog put sleeping powder in his wine. Meanwhile, the princess was under the window of Lady Starvedog, and she broke the last nut. It was an hazelnut, and from that hazelnut popped out a golden girl with a golden loom, making golden clothes. Who wants to buy a golden girl with a golden loom, making golden clothes? Lady Starvedog was too greedy, and she summoned her again, and they made the same bargain again. But that evening, King Pepper just pretended to drink the wine, and she was full awake when he was brought to bed. And again, the princess entered the room and started to weep. "Oh, King Pepper made by hand, sugar sweet and flour." "Shh," said him. "My love, I'm awake. Now we can escape." Shh. And they take shrouds. And with the shrouds, they made a scale. And with the stair, they can descend from the window and leave the palace. Next morning, Lady Starvedog opened King Pepper's room, and she found it empty. And from the rage, she tore out all her hair until she was completely bald. And King Pepper and the princess went to the royal palace where the king father was waiting for them, and they lived happily ever after.
Well, I am so impressed.
Thank you for your patience and your willing to understand. Thank you.
No, I'd like to say that if I could tell you the story in a second
this one that's
third language, it's one of the most difficult. And I think if I had to give you marks out of 10, I'd give you 9.5. That was a very, very good way of telling stories. Now, there is one little bit of advice I can hand over to you. When you're practicing, you tell the story in your first language, which for you is Italian, and then tell it in the language you want to tell it straight after. So you sit and do it to yourself, or do it on a video so you can record yourself. Tell it in your first language, then tell it in your second language and the language you want to tell it straight away. And that way you get the rhythm of the story comes through, because you're not thinking about the language, you're thinking about the story. You're just switching it into a second language. Now, that's what I was told when I was a little boy to do with the languages, my second and third language. And I think I'd like you to try it. It's a gift. If it works for you, it is a gift. If it doesn't work for you, go and do what you're doing, something else, right? But just when you're on your own at some point, tell it in Italian, any story, doesn't matter which one, and then tell it in English for yourself, okay?
Okay, thank you.
See if it helps.
I hope the most of it was understandable for all. Thank you.
No, we think everybody is really impressed because I'm British. And I lived in France for a bit, and my Welsh is really bad. Manpreet, because she's from India, probably speaks about 9 languages, because all the ones I know, they all speak about 9 different languages over there. But everybody else I'm looking at, if you're pretty much based in the UK, I don't know if you speak a bit of French, Norman from Canada. Do you go to Quebec at all?
My mother, elle parle en français, mais j'ai oublié trop de langue parce que pas de personne, no one speaks it.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly.
So in other words, my mother spoke French. My dad forbid her to speak in French. And because of that, I really lost my own language.
Yeah. And the languages are coming. Anyway, I'd like to go back to how I started. Very well done. Congratulations. That was a very, very good.
Larry, it was spectacular.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I agree with that. Right. So we've gone from David, Laura. We're going to Mike Faculty next. Colin, will you go after Mike? Rachel, will you go after Colin? Janet, will you go after Colin? Rachel, will you go after Janet? Is that okay? Rachel, are you telling tonight? Yeah. And who's the good-looking chap next door to you?
That's my cook.
The cook and the bottle washer. Yes, I know. Okay, so the order's going to be Mike next, Colin, Janet, Rachel. Okay. So Mike, over to you.
I had a story I'd like to tell. It's from Punjab, but I've very much adapted it. I first heard it told by Rob Cleveland, an American, and then by Peter Chand, a Brahmi. And this is it. A long, long time ago in Punjab, in a little village in a valley in the mountains, was a very poor single mother and her son. And every year, ever since he was tiny, her son had said, "Can I have a dog, Mum? Mum, I'd like a dog. For my birthday, can I have a dog? For Christmas, can I have a dog?" And every year she said, "We'll see," which you probably know in grown up means no. Then one year, just before his birthday, she'd had a bit of luck and she had a bit of money. So she said, "Almost certainly," because, you know, it's grown up for maybe. And the night before his birthday, there was a huge flood and the whole valley was flooded. And the man who had the dog for him, that dog was washed away in the flood. And so when his mum went to get the dog, the man said, "I haven't got a dog. The dog's washed away. In fact, all I've got in the house that you could maybe have for him, and it's not much, but I've got a drumstick. I know that's disappointing, but I have got a drumstick." And the mum said, "It'll have to do. I've no time to get anything else." And so she took the drumstick home and she wrapped it up. And the next morning, the little boy came running down. Mum, where's my dog? Where's my dog?" And she had to explain, there isn't a dog. All I've got is a drumstick, which I could try and get on the screen. And he was such a good boy. He said, "Oh, that's all right. I've always wanted a drumstick." He said, "I can teach it tricks like it was a dog. Look, roll over, fall over, lie down, stay, stay, fetch. And his mum was a little bit upset because he'd taken it so well and he was teaching his stick all these tricks. And she said, why don't you go outside and play? Why don't you go outside and play? He said, right, oh, Mum. I'll just tie a bit of string on the neck of my dog and I'm off out to play. And he went out and he was walking along, dragging his stick behind him. And suddenly he could smell acrid smoke, and the black smoke was billowing out, and there was a sound of coughing, and then he started coughing as well. So he crossed over the first bridge. They lived one side of the river, and there was 2 bridges across. He crossed the first bridge and walked along, and he found the village baker, and she was coughing and coughing. And the little boy said, oh my goodness, what's wrong? And she said, all my kindling has got soaked in the flood last night. I can't get my ovens working, and so I can't bake the bread. And the little boy looked at his stick, and he was such a good boy. He said, you can have my stick. If we chop that up, that will burn and it will make heat so that your kindling will light, and then you can make the bread. And so they chopped up the stick, and the baker popped it in and baked some bread and said, oh, you're such a good boy. Thank you so much. You must have the first bread out of the oven. And she spread this roti with butter and gave it to him and said, put it on a little plate thing and said, don't eat it yet, it'll be too hot. You're such a good boy, thank you. And he walked away with the bread, and he suddenly thought to himself, what a strange and wonderful birthday. I wanted a dog, but I got a stick that turned into some bread. Strange. And he walked on, and suddenly he could hear, and he came to the village potter, and the village potter wasn't able to work. He was holding the baby and tapping it on its back, and the baby was crying and crying, as you heard. And he said to the potter, what's wrong? And the potter said, oh, my baby's so hungry. The baker wasn't able to bake, so I wasn't able to give my baby any bread, and he's really hungry, he won't sleep. And so Atul, I did mention, no, he's a really good boy. He said, I've got some bread, you have it, and you can give some to the baby. So the baker said, thank you, and took the bread and gave some to the baby. And the baby just suddenly, instead of, was, I have to be careful because I fall asleep easily. And the baby fell asleep. And the baker said, oh, thank you, you're such a good boy. He said, here, you must have my biggest wash pot. I had this great big wash pot that the boy could hardly hold. So thank you for being so good. And the boy walked away and he thought, what a strange and wonderful birthday. Feel free to join in. I wanted a dog, but I got a stick that turned into some bread that's turned into this dirty great pot. And he staggered along and he came to the bridge back over the river. He was walking along to the bridge and suddenly he heard, oh, my fuck, a very cross man. And he went over the bridge and said, what's wrong? And it was the village laundryman. And the village laundryman was, I'm an idiot. I'm so stupid. Last night I left my big wash pot down here by the river. The floods have smashed it on the rocks. Oh, I'm an idiot. I bet you can't guess what Atul did. Well, I'll tell you. I call him Atul. I don't know if that's his real name. I've got this big pot. You can have it. Then you'll be able to do your laundry. And the laundryman said, are you sure? He said, yeah, you can have it. And so the laundryman said, thank you, and took the pot. He said, I've got to do something for you because you've been so good. I've got this old coat that's too big for anyone, but you could borrow it. No, you could have it. You can have it to say thank you for the pot. And he gave Atul this coat. And Atul thought, well, thank you. And he rolled the sleeves up about 90 times and he pulled it up. And he took his little bit of string from when he was walking his stick dog and tied it around the middle so that it didn't drape on the floor. And it sort of hung out almost to the floor over the string. And he walked along. And then suddenly he heard, a sheep, a sheep, a sheep. And he came around the corner and there was a man just in his underwear, dripping wet and shivering. And he was holding a dog. he told to the man, "Oh, what's happened?" And the man said, "I was just minding my business and I suddenly saw this little dog trapped by a branch in the flood. And I jumped in and I rescued him, but I've got soaked through and I'm freezing. So I've taken my clothes off and I've put them on the bushes in the hope they'll dry. Oh, I'm so cold." Now, you know, don't you, what Atul did? He said, "I've got this coat. You can have it." And he took it off and he gave it to the man. The man wrapped it around himself and started to warm up. And then he got warm enough that he could talk properly. He said, "Oh, what a good boy you are. Thank you. Now, can you do me one more favor?" And the little boy said, "Yeah, what shall I do?" He said, "I've rescued this dog from the river, but I don't want a dog. Would you take the dog and look after him for me?" And the little boy said, "Yes, of course. Oh, I'd love to. Oh, yeah, that's brilliant." And he still had his bit of string because he'd undone it from the coat and he wrapped it around the dog's neck. And he walked home. And as he walked home, he thought to himself, what a strange and wonderful birthday. I wanted a dog that turned into a stick, that turned into some bread, that turned into a pot, that turned into a coat, that's turned into a dog of my very own. I'll take him home and I'll teach him all the tricks." And that's my story.
That was lovely. Thank you very much. So you say that came from the Punjab?
It did, yes. Originally, it was
right.
the drum, and the boy wants a drum, and he does all those swaps, then swaps the coat for a horse, and then the horse for a drum. But I just snapped it because I was using it for Christmas. So
it's a change story.
Yeah,
that's what we call it. You know, between John and I and a few others, we know an awful lot of them one way or another. But thank you very much. That's lovely. So we go to Colin. For a bit of Northern Ireland from Larne, just up the coast. Is it snowing over there?
No, it's not, Mike. But it's we've had this bitter easterly wind for the last couple of days, and it's dried everything up, and it would remind you on the sort of precursor to a big dump of snow. But we'll see. We'll just have to take what we get.
Well, don't worry about it. It can avoid us, and you can have it because it's coming from the east at the moment. Okay. You are protected by the Pennines and the Scottish Highlands and stuff, so you probably won't get too much actually. So, anyway, Dave, we'll go to you, Colin. Great.
Okay, I'm going to take you. That was great there, Mike. By the way, I think I have heard Peter Chan tell that story. Actually, that's a cracker. I want to take you to David was talking about Nepal and so on there, and I've been lucky enough to do a bit of climbing in Scotland and France and Spain and also Nepal when I was much younger and more foolish. But one of my favorite places in the entire world, and I go to it very often just for a walk nowadays, is a place called Fairhead, and it's right up on the north coast of Ireland, only about half an hour's drive from where I live. And it's these sheer sea cliffs are about 400 feet high, and it's a magical place. And people come from all over the world now to scale these crags of Fairhead. And I saw on a television program the other night where it said that it was some of the best rock climbing in the world. I don't know about that, but it's certainly a magical place. And when you're standing on Fairhead looking out, you're looking out to place called Rathlin Island, which is magical in itself, and then beyond that you're looking out into the wild Atlantic Ocean, and it's just breathtaking. And the last golden eagles in Ireland bred there in the 1950s. There's still peregrine falcons there, and a red-billed crow called a chuff, and by any standards it's a magical place, foreboding, romantic, achingly beautiful. And if you ever find yourself in this part of the world, give me a shout and I'll take you up there. And hundreds of years, people have been living up on the top of Fairhead, because once you get above the cliffs, it's just this flat, open expanse of heather and lochs. There's two very famous lochs up there. And there's a very famous path. Unless nowadays people use ropes and all kinds of things to scale up and down these cliffs, but there is a very steep and dangerous path that goes down through the cliffs and takes you down to the shore and gives you access to that whole coastal area, which is otherwise totally remote. And the local people up there have been using this path. It's called the Grey Man's Path. And they use it as a shortcut to get down to what's known as Murloch Bay. And this path foreshortens the journey by about 10 miles. And so people have always taken the risk, they've risked their lives to use this path so as they don't have to walk 10 miles there and 10 miles back from Murloch Bay. And this path, why do people want to go down there? Well, the people want to go down there to collect and gather a seaweed that we call over here, it's called dulse, and it's an edible seaweed, and it's a very, back in those days, it was a food source. People needed it to survive. Nowadays, it's sold to tourists to take a little bag of Northern Ireland home with them. And if you've never had that opportunity, I can highly recommend it to you. But of course, over the years, hundreds of people have fallen to their death using this path. And I suppose that's probably why the Grey Man's Path and that whole area up there has so many strange ghost stories and occurrences associated with it. The Grey Man's Path, the Grey Man himself, after which the path is named after, is a very famous ghost that is most often seen up there. But as we say over here, Shin Scialella, that's a story for another day. I'll come back to that sometime again. I really want to tell you about a young girl, a young woman called Mary Mcinaulty, who lived up on the top of Fairhead near a loch called Loch Dhu. There's two lochs. There's one called Loch na Cranach, and that has an old ancient 1,000-year-old cranach, which is an island, a man-made island in the middle of the loch. And the other loch is called Loch Dhu. Dhu in Irish is black. It's called the Black Loch. Both of these are up on top of Fairhead. And this young Mary Mcinaulty, she used to leave her cottage and walk past the Black Loch down through this very steep Grey Man's Path and down onto Murloch Bay to collect the seaweed called dulse, put it in a creel, and she would put that creel on her back and carry it up this very steep path. And one summer evening, just as it was coming on dark, she was returning home with a full creel. And as usual, she had to stop every now and again to catch her breath because this path is, as I've said, very steep and the load was very heavy. And as she was taking a rest and looking out over to Rathlin Island and the ocean, in the dim light, she saw a figure coming along the path that she had just taken herself. And he seemed to have a very strange way of walking. He had like a limp, or as we would say over here, a gammy leg. Nevertheless, she paid him very little heed. And by the time she lifted up her basket and walked up another few yards, she had to set it down and have another rest. And when she looked back down, she could see that the stranger was catching up with her. So she lifted her creel onto her back and she carried on up the path. And she rested again. But this time when she rested, the stranger had almost caught up on her, and he was quite close to her. And so just to be civil and polite, Mary spoke to the stranger and commented on what a lovely evening it was. And the stranger returned her civility, but his accent was very strange, and he spoke in this harsh whisper like this. Mary assumed that he was some sort of traveling man. Of course, in those days, there were many traveling men who just continuously walked around the countryside begging and looking for work. And so she hoisted her creel up onto her back and she continued up the Grey Man's Path. And when she reached the top, she sat down to rest once more on a rock, set her creel down beside her. And this time, the stranger took the liberty of getting very close to young Mary, and he sat down in the heather right beside her. And of course, this made the young woman very uncomfortable indeed. And so she looked around, and the only thing she could think to do was to point over to her house. And she said, I live in that cottage over there, just beyond Loch Dhu, with my father. The stranger said, I know. Well, Mary was very surprised at his answer, because she didn't recognize this man. And in the last sort of glimmer of daylight, she tried to study his face, and she looked at it across as the last rays of the daylight was catching it, and his face was pale and wan, and it almost looked like a corpse. And then she noticed that underneath he had a hood which was attached to his cloak, and underneath this there were long strands of straggly hair hanging out. And she noticed that his hair looked as though it was green. And being an inquisitive young girl, she couldn't help but ask why. And the stranger said, it's from living beneath the waters of Loch Dhu all these hundreds and hundreds of years. Well, Mary began to fear for her safety, because she thought this man must be drunk or insane or both. And just then he let out this very long, sputtering sigh. And he laid his head right on her lap and fell fast asleep. Well, for a moment, Mary was paralyzed with terror. She looked around. She could see the little lights in the cottages around the top of Fairhead. But if she screamed for help, by the time anyone would have come to her aid, he could have strangled her or thrown her over the cliff. And then Mary noticed something else very unusual about her mysterious stalker. When she looked at his feet, they were shaped like horses' hooves. Well, she was terrified. And so she gently eased herself away and lifted his head from her lap, slipped herself out, and she took her shawl off her shoulders and she put it in below his head and rested his head back down onto the rock. And then she took off like a hare, running, her feet barely touching the ground, and all she could hear was the thud of her heart in her chest. And every second she was waiting to be grabbed from behind. And when she got to within hailing distance of her own home, she began to hear the galloping hoofs coming behind her, and the wild neighing of an enraged stallion. Well, she must have tripped and fallen, banged her head, or just fainted with sheer terror. Of course, her father heard all the commotion and he ran from the cottage, but as he came out, the night fell deathly silent. He found his daughter lying in the heather. She was unconscious, almost lifeless. And he carried her back in to the house, and he revived her. And the next morning she had recovered sufficiently that they were able to go back along the path to find where she had left her creel of seaweed, of dulse. And there in the soft, peaty ground, they could see the hoof prints left by the devil horse that lives under the waters of the Black Loch. You see, before that night, Mary Mcinaulty had not believed the old stories that the old people had told about the creature that lives in Loch Dhu. The one that comes out at twilight and walks along the grey man's path, hoping to lure some unsuspecting young woman back down into the underworld. But after that night, Mary never took the grey man's path again. When she was going to gather dulse, she preferred to walk the 10 miles around to Murlough Bay and the 10 miles back again. And if you ever find yourself up there, just as it's coming on dark, I would advise you to do the same thing.
Thank you very much, Mike. So how far is that away from the Giant's Causeway?
Oh, 10 minutes round the corner.
Right. Okay.
Fair heads up, right up on the top, and just as you kind of turn left when you get to the top of Ireland, the Giant's Causeway is about 10 miles. Something like that.
Yeah. Right, that's great.
Magical place. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I've been there a couple of times. So, but the whole of that part of Ireland and the mountains of Mourne and the Mourne Mountains and all that, I find it all magical. Yeah. And I was there talking to John Campbell and Liz Weir when I went over there, and it got even more magical with John Campbell. Absolutely. Right, so we went through Janet next, and then to Rachel after. Where's Rachel? There we are. Are we okay, Rachel? Wave. Yeah, brilliant. Okay. Janet.
Ready? Okay. I want to tell you a story that was written by a friend of mine called Peter Gray. I heard him tell the story and it just stuck in my head. I've only told it a few times before, but I think it follows fairly well from Collins. For the coastline of Norway is rugged as the Atlantic coast of Northern Ireland and of Western Scotland. And at the head of each fjord, there's usually a wee village. And there was a wee village. I was at the head of a deep, narrow fjord. It was a thriving village. It had been there, no one knew how long. And this, when I tell this story, I'm setting it, say, maybe 400 years ago. It was a thriving village because the men were good fishermen. It was the fish that brought in the funds. It was the fish that brought in the food. It was the fish that kept them thriving. When there was plenty of fish, they took it down to Bergen to sell. When there wasn't plenty of fish, there was fish manure. It manured the ground. The ground was rich, and in the summer, the children ate strawberries. They ate fruit. The women, some kept goats, some kept a pig. The village was prosperous, and it thrived. But it was an isolated village because behind it, as you'll know, down Norway runs the mountains. It was very difficult to cross the mountains in summer. Oh, talk about narrow footpaths, Colin. It was almost impossible to get into the center of Norway over the mountains. So the sea was the highway, and the men were the sailors, and they were the best navigators of all, and they were good fishermen, the best fishermen of all. Every family had a fisherman, a brother, a father, a lover, a cousin, a grandfather. All were fishermen. Lars was acknowledged as being the best of all the fishermen. He had no family, but because he was so respected, he was kind of honorary fisherman captain. So when the boats went out, each boat representing a family with the father, the grandfather, the brother, the cousin, all in the boat. They trusted Lars to guide them, for Lars could read the sky. If he saw a squall, a grey squall, he could almost smell, would this be the snow squall or just a warm rain squall? And if he saw the sea a little boiling, was it boiling because the wind was whipping underneath, like Corrie-Vrecken? If the wind whips underneath, then you have no chance, none at all. But Lars was the captain. He was recognized as the safe pair of hands. So in the morning, when the fishing boats went out and the women stood there just as the sun rose and waved goodbye to their menfolk, they were all comfortable, as comfortable as any fisherman's wife is when her husband sets out to sea. Out in the Atlantic, Lars had seen the shoal, the silver, the rush of the herring beneath at the side, and had cast the nets and had drawn those nets high over the side and tipped, wriggling. They're slimy. They're not slimy. They're not slimy, those fish. They're soft, and they fall into the baskets. Catch was huge, and so were the waves. Where did those huge waves come from? Even Lars, he's looking over his shoulder. He didn't know. This was the strangest storm that he had ever experienced. A storm which whipped around the keel and turned the boats until each boat, plank, 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 they caught and they tipped each other over. They moved closer and closer to the mouth of the fjord, but the wind, it crashed. It crashed those great Atlantic waves and the boats between them. It crashed into those granite cliffs, and there was not a bone amongst the men that wasn't broken. There was not a body that wasn't battered. The women in the evening waited on the shore for the men to return. They were still waiting in the dark when one body, clinging to a long piece of clinker, was washed up. One woman turned over the body and saw the battered face of Lars. One woman bent close. It was cold, but there was just the slightest breath. And so they put their own bodies against his until he was warm, until his breath came, until he was able to be carried back into the village. Weeks went by. The women began to ask, Lars, where are our men? Lars had no answer. Lars and the women knew where the men were, where their bones were, at the entrance to the fjord. And the women became bitter. And sometimes they would stand at the head of the fjord and look out. Lars would stand with them. One morning, one of the women turned and said to Lars, "We trusted you with our men. We trusted you, and you betrayed them, and you betrayed us. And for that, you must be punished." Lars was silent. The storm had taken everything he had. His men, his boat, his livelihood. He was bare and broken, but the women were bitter. They'd lost their men. They couldn't feel for Lars. They must punish him. They held a council and they pronounced the worst punishment of all. Now, this is a punishment that had been accepted in centuries past, and that was punishment by fire. And so with the driftwood, perhaps the wood from the boats of their own men, they built a fire. And they strapped Lars to the top of that fire, that bonfire. They lit the fire, and as the fire burned, Lars said nothing until the last moment, and in his agony, he whispered, "I am innocent." 3 times he said, "I am innocent. I am innocent." And the women turned their backs and walked away. In the cold light of the next day, they kicked the ashes into the waters of the fjord. The village didn't thrive any longer. There were no men to go fishing, no men to take out the boats. The women had blackness in their hearts. Some of them took the difficult path over the mountains to the cities, down to Bergen, down to Stavanger. Some of them stayed, but there were no men for them to marry, no men to make more children. And then came the famines, the dark skies, and the blight. And eventually the village died. It emptied of people, it emptied of life, and the coarse grass grew over it. The wooden houses crumbled and rotted. And you would think, wouldn't you, that story, that village just disappeared from memory. So it did, more or less, until something a little unusual, strange perhaps, occurred. It occurred in the later half of the 20th century, when Stavanger was a town from which the explorers went out into the sea, not to catch the fish, but to find the oil and the gas, and they found it. And they built the platforms, those great, huge, strong platforms. And Stavanger is now a lively, strong town with a wonderful petroleum museum, and it is wonderful. And it was amazing because the great platform, the very first one, was erected. And as you know, you have to burn off the waste gas. And on the first day, and on the first flare, the sound came as the flare went up, its great fire. Whoosh, the sound came. I am innocent. I am innocent. I am innocent.
Great. We should celebrate it.
A lovely, lovely story, Janet, and thank you very much.
Well, I have my friend Peter to thank for it, and I do like it. It stuck with me. And if you do go to Norway, and you're not climbing, because, oh well, you climb in Norway, it's beautiful. go to the Petroleum Museum. It is absolutely fascinating. I didn't want to go. I really did not want to go. I wanted to go to the Sardine Museum.
Well, I'm due to go up. I've never been to Denmark, Sweden, or Norway, but I'm due to go. I was due to go this year because I bought a nickel harper.
Yeah.
And they play a lot of nickel harpers up there, so I'm going to go. As soon as when we get into the new normal, whatever that is, it's on my bucket list.
Well, either if you go to the Sardine Museum or the Petroleum Museum, it matters not which. They're both thoroughly intriguing. Both.
I am going to go to the Viking Longship Museum.
Oh yes, that's even better.
Right, Michael Cumberford. I have messaged you. Do you want to do something? Are you looking? John tells me you're a very famous poet. Can you unmute yourself for a second? I'm going to go to Rachel next. Now, I bet it's snowing up your way, Rachel.
Okay. Not, yeah. Okay.
Would you like to do something?
Yes, please. Yes, a poem.
Okay, can I put Rachel on next and then me?
Oh, yes, of course, yes.
Does that be okay? Fine. Okay.
Yeah, fine.
Fine. So we go to Rachel next. If you unmute yourself.
I will. I've unmuted myself. I'm going to move my cook out of view because he's very distracting.
We think he's very handsome.
Yeah, absolutely. Not bad. Very nice home help to have.
I'm sure when the rest of the world are up in Matlock listening to stories, what's his first name? We can nick off down to the pub and have a pint.
He needs no encouragement to go to the pub. Neither do I, to be honest.
I'd like him even more. Okay. Anyway, Rachel, for those of you who don't know, is a very famous storyteller across the whole of the UK, but particularly in Derbyshire.
Particularly in my own cottage, absolutely. I think I could say I'm the most celebrated storyteller in this room.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah, there we go.
Legend in your own lunchtime.
Rachel, there's an old book. It's in every church in the land, and it says, "Do not hide your light under a bushel."
Oh, that's all right. I haven't got any bushels. So, but I've really enjoyed the story so far today. The variety's just been wonderful, and
it's been like having a little club, and it's lovely. And so
it's great. It's like it's got a very intimate feel to it, hasn't it? And I think you sort of listened to one story. I was listening to Colin's story, and I was thinking about the story of the devil and the lawyer and things. I was like, oh yeah, that'd be a nice one to tell. And I was thinking about Mike's story. I was thinking, oh no, the king with the golden bowl. And then Janet told the story about the fisherman, and I thought, no, actually, what you need is this one. Because there was a fisherman. This one's a bit lighter, I think, Janet. I was a little bit traumatised, to be honest. I've just been sat here sort of doing some deep breathing, like, my heart aches a bit for Lars. I think it was a bit harsh, really, setting him on fire. But but there was a fisherman, and he'd finished his day's work, and he pulled his boat up onto the shingle, and he sat on the shore looking out at the waves, and the sunlight still danced on the ocean, and it sparkled, and the sky was blue. And he sat and he surveyed the scene. He sat quietly, contentedly. And then along the shore came a very busy little man in a suit which was tied up just that little bit too tight, with a tie that was tightened around his neck so his flesh bulged over the top, and his temples bulged as he moved in a forward action of a man of determination. And he made his way past, and he saw the fisherman sat there on the shingle. He went over to him and said, "My good man," he said, "surely you haven't finished work for today, have you?" The fisherman said, "Aye." He said, but there's still plenty of light in the sky, the sea, the weather is fine. You could go out and catch more fish. Aye. And then if you caught more fish, you could bring them back and take them to the market and sell them. Aye. And when you've sold those fish, then you could buy yourself another boat. You could employ more people and they could go out and catch fish. Aye. And then they bought more fish. Then you could bring them in. Said then you could build more fish, buy more boats, and you could catch more fish. And the fisherman looked at me and said, and then what would I do? And the little businessman said, well, then, of course, you are the master of your own destiny, and you can sit back and enjoy your life. What do you think I'm doing now? Said the fisherman.
Yes. Now, there is an absolute, in the USA of America, in every state, if you go to any storytelling festival, you will hear that story. And it always comes from that town in that place in America. For some reason, they just believe and own that story. It fits their culture and everything else, but they just love it. Absolutely, do they love that story?
I can't do that because we're so landlocked here. It's like we're in the centre of the country. We are the furthest from the coast you can possibly get in any direction, I think. So, no, we don't own that story, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, in America, it's amazing. You'll hear it, if you go to a storytelling festival, you'll hear it 5 times in different places all over. It's just one of those, it really is. Okay.
And if anyone wants to hear more of Rachel, she's with us again this Friday at 6 o'clock doing children's stories. You're never too old for children's stories.
No, and she's a very, very good storyteller as well. So absolutely, that'll be a very good night. Absolutely. Right. So Michael Cumberford will come next, and then we're going to Norman from Canada, and we'll see where we go from there. Okay. So you have to unmute yourself, Michael. Yeah. Speak.
Yes, okay, hello. I'm Michael Comerford from Plymouth. I'm born in Plymouth, but now I was a teacher in London. Now I've got back to Plymouth. I'd like to say about a poem. Two sliding doors. In the Northern Line district, Jubilee, Metropolitan, Gabriel Oak and Bathsheba Aberdeen, Gabriel Oak and Bathsheba Aberdeen in lockdown, far from the madding crowd, still dicing, taking taking Bible and key lightly, all is fair to play for. Looking or forward to advice, what level, what fee, what reaffection level, minus or lower. Tipping, pint, tipping point reached. 30 out, 38 degrees on the spider's web. Scientists, perceptive, thermodynamics. What about the New Jerusalem? The few, the many, New World Symphony, new normal tuning in. Chimes sounding, ringing out, que sera, sera, que sera, sera, going with the flow. Change is gonna come. All is fair play. All is fair and foul play. A love game in the set. Aces, kingdoms, thrones, optimism, optimistic, optimum, openings, sounds to follow, dumonium, game, set, match, two sliding doors, a result, resulting. Thank you.
That was lovely. Thank you very much. Was that one of your own, or?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yes.
Absolutely. I loved it. Great. Now we do this once a fortnight, so we're not here next Sunday, but in a week on Sunday we're all back again. I'd very much like for you to come and do some more poems.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I really would. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Right. So Norman would be next.
Oh, thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
I was hoping that David Heathfield would hear this story, but there you go. And I debated, and I thought it was still appropriate to tell it. It's happened in the countryside of Hebron, in the land of Palestine, as my friend Abu Sharar, who told me this story about her father, said takes place. And back then they were all very poor up in the hills, and they would go to their school, and the school teacher would have them sit down. And although they were very poor, everyone, all the boys had shoes. But one boy always came barefoot, and this angered the teacher. And he watched the boy come in barefoot until at last one day he said, "Unless you come in with shoes tomorrow." And he said this to the boy in front of all of the other students. "Unless you come tomorrow with shoes on, you must stay home." Well, to be deprived of an education was, an incredible blow to the young boy. And all of the children who heard this, well, there's an innate sense of justice, isn't there? Because you see, you may guess what happened the next day. Every single child arrived at school barefoot and put their bare feet in prominent view, I assume. And the teacher, and this is my favorite part actually, the teacher looked at all those toes wiggling away, and he said, "Well, if everyone else is barefoot, I guess I have to be too." And he took his own shoes off, and this lesson went on, and that's the end of my story.
Oh. Right. So I'm going to finish off with a small one, but Lucy hasn't come on to the video, and I have asked her, but so I'm assuming you don't want to do anything, Lucy. If you do, would you just put something on the chat for me? Right. If you come into Shropshire here, and I live in a place called the Apedale. Now you have dales up in Derbyshire and up in the north of England, and below me is southwards is the Corvedale, and from then on they're valleys. So you've got, as you go into Herefordshire, they're called valleys. So the most southerly dale of all is called the Corvedale. And in that Corvedale, there are 3 or 4 different castles. We live on the Welsh borders. We've got more castles and fortified houses than anywhere in the world. We had to keep the Welsh out, and the Welsh had to keep the English out, and it's a long-going thing for about 1,000 years. All the churches are fortified and everything else. But these new couple, they bought this old house. And they came from London, and they bought this great big house, and it was a castle, and they had 2 little daughters. They had a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old. And because they were refurbishing it all and everything else, they put them in what was called the Nun Cell. Now, the Nun Cell was about 10 foot long, it was about 6 foot wide, and it had 1 door in it, and 2 little beds, and a table in between. And the one little girl went to bed on one side, and the other little girl went to bed on the other side, and there they stayed. Well, they stayed there until they were about 17 or 18. They had a great big mansion to live in. They had music rooms, they had servants, but they just insisted that they had to sleep together in this little room because the nun came and talked to them. Well, the mum thought, well, yeah, I've heard about white rabbits. We've heard about friends. We've heard about comfort blankets and all the other things. And my two daughters, they believe a nun talks to them. There's no harm in that at all. Anyway, but they wouldn't move into rooms for themselves. They had guest rooms if parents or friends or grandparents came to stay. But these two girls stayed in this room. Anyway, when the oldest one got to about 18, now, when she got to about 18, it was about the year 2000, about then. Off to university, she was a clever family. He was a banker. Clever family. And the mother was a part-time vet. So she was going to Edinburgh University to study architecture. And the day she was leaving, they took her down to Ludlow station and she was going to get on the train and go all the way to Edinburgh, start a freshers week at university and all the rest of it. And she turned around to her sister and said, just tell the nun I'll be back at Christmas. And the mother went potty. She said, you're 17 and 18 years now. Isn't it about time you gave up talking to the white rabbits and nuns and all the rest of it? What do you know? You've got to grow up. They're going to laugh their heads off at you at university if you go around talking that you had an imaginary nun. They'll think you're drunk or something. And the two girls looked at the mother and went, you never did believe us. And the youngest one said, I will tell the nun. Anyway, the mother was furious. She was stomping around. She was talking to her husband. She shouted at the dog. You know what mothers do when they get cross. They sort of chuck things out of their prams and all sorts of things. She did all these things. Anyway, the youngest one was just going to bed and she was 17. And the mother went in and sat down and said, what are you going to do? What's all this about the nun? Isn't it about time you gave it all up? And they said, yes, Mum. You never did believe us. Just leave me to it. It'll be the first time I can remember I have to sleep by myself. I'm sure the nun will come. And anyway, the mother, and she closed the door. But as she closed the door this time, instead of closing it from the outside, she closed it from the inside and she sat down with her back up against the wall, the door, and it was completely dark. And the nun, a ghostly figure, walked straight through the wall, went and sat down on the end of bed, and she had a little candle and a Bible. And she started reading a story from the Bible. Well, the mother jumped up and said, who the hell are you? And she turned around and the nun jumped up and said, I've been the one teaching your children the religious education and the religious history and the Bible and the thing called faith. Because you didn't do it, so I had to do it. And the mother was absolutely speechless. She was going, well, what are you talking about? You can't just do this to my children. She said, I can, and I have done. I've told them a story every night since the first time they came here. But I see the other one's gone. Well, the daughter was absolutely furious with her mother, and the two of them ripped into each other big time. And the mother went and turned the electric light on, and they were shouting at each other so much they didn't see where the nun had gone. But when they did stop shouting at each other, there was no nun there, and it was light. Well, mobile phones got out. The oldest one had only been in Edinburgh about 4 hours and she was on her way back again. She got in the train and she came straight back down to London. They got onto the house and there was the biggest argument you've ever seen in your life. The two sisters shouting at the mother, mother shouting, the father was involved, da 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 da. Anyway, they said, right, this is what's going to happen. We're going to go to bed at 10 o'clock, like we always do. And you're not coming anywhere near the place. We're going to lock the door from the inside. Well, the mother was still chomping around. Anyway, and that's exactly what they did. But the nun didn't come again. And the nun never came again. And the oldest girl, she went back off to university. And the younger one, she went off to university. She went to be a lawyer. But she didn't, and she went down to London to study. And those two girls never ever saw the nun again. Now, you're wondering how I'd hear the story. Well, I heard the story from the younger one. She came to the storytelling club one night and she wanted to tell us a ghostly story, and she told us this one. And she said, you'll know it's true because I was the younger daughter. And so I looked at her, and there was an older version of her in the bar, which turned out to be her mother. And I asked the mother to come in, and she was still chuntering away. So I asked her this question. I said, if I ask your children a question about the Bible, would they probably know the answer? And the youngest one said yes, and the mother said no. They've never had any religious education. So I asked her this question. Tell me, well, this is what I said to her. I said, do you know the story of Esther the Spy? And she went, yes, of course I do. And she told the story of Esther the Spy. Now, I don't know if you fellas know it. It's a book from it's a story from the Old Testament. It's not one that's told very often, which is why I picked it. I didn't see her for a while, but one day I was knocking around Ludlow Market on the Saturday. It's a lovely, Ludlow Market's a wonderful place to go. It's an old medieval town. You can come to it. If you want to go on holiday, it's a foodie place. It's got beautiful women and it's got beautiful beer, and the cricket team keeps losing to Church Stretton. It's a wonderful place to go to. And I saw her there, and I went over and I said, do you remember me? And she said, I remember you very well, Mike. You're the storyteller. I said, tell me the next chapter. And she said, I left home, she said, but I live in Ludlow now. I'm a lawyer. And my mum and dad still live in the castle, but the nun, to our knowledge, has never come back. But you want to listen to this, Mike, she said, because I'm a mother now and I've got a little girl, and my sister's a mother and she's got a little boy. And we go there for Christmas and high days and holidays. But they always insist on sleeping in that room because they like the bedtime stories. I went, oh, that's interesting. She said, will you make me a promise? And I said, yes, if I can, I will. And she said, never mention the name of the castle, our castle, and never mention the name of my children. And I said, I'll make it better than this. I will never mention the name of the castle, and I will never mention the name of any of the people by their first names in it. And I've kept that promise now for 40 odd years. The youngest granddaughter is about 16 or 17. And we were playing a few tunes in the Blue Boar, which is the pub by the castle in Ludlow. When we go down there and we play a few whistles, and I've got a nickel harper, and we play a few tunes and everything else. And I saw the whole family in the back of the room. They were listening. And now two very well elegantly dressed, 40, nearly 40 something young ladies, I can call them young, I'm well into my 60s, both came over and bought me a pint. And they bought a pint each, and they put it on the table and said, thank you for keeping your promise. And I said, I'll keep promises like that for the rest of my life. You keep giving me beer. That's not a problem at all. So there's a little ghosty story from Shropshire, and it's a modern one. And I've been collecting stories. I'm going to try and do a show. I'm retiring just about now. I've just got a festival to run, Rachel. Don't worry about that. Collecting ghost stories where the ghosts talk. Now, if you come across, and the one you told, Colin, was lovely, because the ghost talks, or these spirits in the stories, whatever it is, when they talk, that's when the stories become interesting. And I'm beginning to collect them. I've got half a dozen. There's a little girl down in Worcestershire who had anorexia, and they sit outside of a church, and one or two, and they really. This is where I'm going to spend my next time doing a bit of collecting. So anyway, a nice little ghosty story, which is a modern one from Ludlow, and I hope you like it. And it's called the Nun Story. And like I said, you won't find the castle and you won't find the family, and that's best that it's kept like that. Great. Right, so you can all unmute yourselves for a moment. Right, well, I'd like to say thank you very much for you all being here. And I don't know if we can stay on for a few minutes, John, and just have a chat, or
of course we can.
The guys in Marrakesh. If anybody hasn't seen me, this is a very small bottle of beer, and I'm going to drink the rest of it. But one of the things we've done with our festival, which is to get a word in edgeways nowadays, is to leave these Zoom accounts on for 10 minutes or so after we finish with people. Because here in the UK, Norman, we're all locked down still.
In here, we've gone into lockdown more.
Just for people to have a chat. So if we just leave it open so people can just have a chat. you can talk about fascinating things like the cricket, and we don't want to talk about the rugby particularly because we lost because we're England. But if anybody's from Scotland around there want to do it, Ireland were unlucky, Colin. I think it's probably. Anyway, just leave it open. We'll talk about any subject you like.
I just wanted to ask, Norm, can you tell where did your story come from? You said Hebron.
Yeah, it's a true story. It happened to my friend Sarah's father.
Oh, I love it. I really like it. I'd like to have that one in my little pocket, if I may.
Okay, Sarah gave me permission to tell it, so I will ask her. I may be speaking with her later today, and because Sarah has lovely stories about her father, about a vanished time in the Hebron Hills, and yes, I think it would be a good story for other people to tell.
I love the solidarity of the children, because that's not a message they often get, though, is it? This idea that actually they've got some agency and some power and things, and I really love that.
I wish I could have been there, a fly on the wall when they all marched in barefoot.
Do you know about the 100,000 starfish, Rachel, that land up on the beach?
Yeah.
They made a difference to that one.
Yes, absolutely. That's lovely.
Yeah.
By the way, I just want to give my appreciation to this group. I join other online groups, but I particularly like being here because I feel like I'm out of the house. Pretty well, where the city of Toronto is in lockdown again. So.
Well, this is the UK, Norman. So not only are we in lockdown, we've invented a couple of new variants just to make sure it's more awkward.
Yes.
Okay. Just as a gift to the globe, But our scientists do seem to be on top of it. The one thing I don't get about the lockdowns is they're saying that you can do online learning for the 5, 6, 7-year-olds in the primary schools. I don't get how you can teach online to a 5-year-old. I just can't see how it should happen. So I think that they need to find a way of getting these kids back into school. And if that means that the pubs have to stay closed for a bit longer, then I'll do this and have a drink instead. I'd be happy to have the pubs closed and the schools open.
I'd argue that 5-year-olds don't need teaching anyway. They just need to be playing. That's what I'd be arguing.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
I'm with you.
I absolutely agree, but some of them haven't got much space, and some of them haven't got devices, and all the rest of it. And it's winter. In the summertime, when they could get out into the park and things, that would be fine.
But the whole focus of lost education, I think, is completely not the argument at all. I think we've just got to be so looking after their emotional and their state of well-being. It's essential.
Yeah, I've got a 6-year-old granddaughter, but her mother is an essential worker, so she's going to have Lacey. May her name is. She's been at school all year, and so I consider it to be exceptionally lucky that she's been to school.
Yeah,
I really do. Yeah,
I work with vulnerable children in schools, so I'm still doing some of that work, and it's essential for that contact and everything else. But it's but like I say, I really don't think it shouldn't be about education anymore. Well, emotional education.
We're going to have to learn to read and write at some point.
The world survived for thousands of years on the oral tradition. So the traditionalists tell me. I think that's nonsense. But
well, okay, John, they put you and me in charge of the UK, and we'll see how we get on. All right.
Oh, we could sink totally, leaving this huge space where the English Channel joins up with the Irish Sea with nothing in between. It would be
No, I'd put a great big bridge from Liverpool to the Isle of Man into Dublin, right, and then I'd sell Scotland to whoever wanted to buy it.
It's only because Jack is not on tonight, you can say. Right, what? So yeah, it's been a great night, hasn't it? Thank you, Mohammed, down in Marrakesh, for driving the bus for us tonight.
You're welcome, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you all. It was
John,
a great
Colin, I'll see you tomorrow night.
Yes, of course. I'll see you tomorrow night. But I put it in the chat there about I'm featured teller at the Yarn Spinners, Lisburn Library Yarn Spinners, which is this Thursday, 3 p.m. to 4:30. If anyone's interested, be mostly myself, but they'll bring in another couple of tellers as well, of course. And I put the link up on the chat there if you want to, if anyone's interested. And if
I'll tell you what, I've done that venue, and when I did it for Liz Weir.
Yeah.
And she paid me £60. This was back in the 80s. She paid me £60. And she paid me with 6 £10 notes that were all different.
we print a lot of money over here.
Yeah. It was at the Royal Bank of Ulster. There was one bank I'd never even heard of, like.
You know something? I was actually asked to leave Tesco's one time because I was trying to buy something with Ulster notes, and they would not accept them. I just would not. I had to leave and get some different money from somewhere else. And it
says on all the notes in very small print somewhere, and then you've got to show them that sterling, and that usually.
Well, it was they just would not do it, and it was a long time ago. I would have been maybe the 70s, maybe. But I think they just saw Ulster, and I think they thought, we don't trust this woman. We know what's going. We know what's going on there. So, and it was just easier to, just go.
I tell you what, Danny, I was up at the Storytelling Centre in Edinburgh, and I came back with a Scottish £5 note, which I gave to my local pub, which was in those days was the Wenlock Edge Inn. And so I bought a pint, and I said, "It's Stone, you got to take it." And Steve behind the bar said, "Yeah, no problem at all, Mike." And he took the money, and 2 weeks later, I paid him for something with a £20 note. And in the change was a £5 note from Scotland. And so we did that to each other for about a year until I gave it away to someone else. I go in and give it to him, and about a week later, I get it back again.
The most interesting thing about that is that you were getting 60 quid back in the 1980s, because I'm not getting much more than 60 quid now.
Well, then you're doing all right, aren't you? Because the money for the arts is generally going down. So if you've maintained that 60 quid, you're doing better. You're doing better than most people in the world. How is it in Canada there? Are you all living fat?
Oh Lord, they hardly even recognize the art of storytelling. We usually get it through writers' grants that have been reconfigured for storytellers. But the Canada Council just recognized storytelling as an art about 5 years ago. So not good.
I tell you what, Colin, right after she'd paid me, it was Liz Weir, me, and 2 other people. Anyway, the round of drinks was 2 pints of Guinness and 2 gin and tonics, was £18, right, in about 1988. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I paid the money. So I went back and I said, "I'll buy another round." And Liz Weir said, "No, it's not your round." I said, "No, I insist on buying the second round." So I went back, and there was wooden boxes with keys in them behind the reception. And one of the boxes, I always remember this, it was room 18, because the key was still in it, and that meant that the room was empty. So when I went back, I said, "Right, I want 2 pints of Guinness and 2 gin and tonics. Put it on room 18, and I'll sign for it, because I haven't got any cash." So I went and put them back. I gave Liz Weir a gin and tonic, and I told her what I've done. And I've never seen a gin and tonic disappear so quickly in all my life. She picked it up and put it down in one go. She went, "We're leaving." This is Ulster. You'll get bloody shot for doing that. Right? This pint of Guinness I had disappeared while I was walking out the reception. She nearly about dragged me out by my hair, shoved me in a car, and we went back up. Now I can never pronounce this bloody place, but Ahohill. How do you pronounce it?
Yeah.
Oh,
Ahoho.
Go on. Ahoho?
That's it. Ahoho.
Ahoho, something like that. It's a strange spelling. Anyway,
Yeah.
she went about.
You got it right.
Yeah. She drove about 90 miles an hour, and we stopped at a pub when we got there. she didn't speak to me for weeks after. Yeah. Right.
Rachel, I left my email in the chat.
Lovely, thank you. If I just drop you an email then, and yeah, and then you can let me know.
Okay. Oh, it's just a formality, I think, of a permission, but I like to go through it. It's a friend's story.
Yeah, that's absolutely grand. Yeah, that's lovely. I'm going to have to shoot off because I've got another meeting very shortly. So,
Mike, whereabouts in the Coastline are you?
I live in Longville in the Dale, in the Ape Dale.
Oh, right. Yeah, I used to be in Bromcroft in the Coastline, just at the bottom of the Brown Clee.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, right, okay. Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, you take the road from Church Stretton to Much Wenlock.
Yeah, yeah.
And at the top, the Wenlock Edge, Tales from the Edge and the Festival at the Edge is all because it's called the Wenlock Edge. Get a word in edgeways.
Well, Mike Thatched and I are both on the incredibly beautiful M4, the most picturesque place in the world.
Were you born in Bromcroft?
No. I lived there for about 8 years, from when I was about 23 till my daughter was born there, and it was an amazing place, absolutely gorgeous. We were just over a couple of fields from the castle there.
Yeah, there's lots of castles down there, but the snowdrops are just out at the moment. They're out at their best at the moment.
Oh, it's just I just love it over there, really do.
Well,
I'd still rather live there than pretty much anywhere else. It was very lovely.
Oh, yeah. Derbyshire's not bad. There's just less people here, Rachel.
They're a bit friendlier as well, I find.
Hey, Mohammed, before this goes up on the site, can you chop the session at the end of Michael's story? Story. So
yeah, we're going to start.
I've got to go. Bye, folks.
Okay, see you later. See you in a fortnight, mate. Okay.
Mike, thank you very much for comparing again. Magnificent. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us. And thank you, Ali.
Goodbye. I must go.
Thanks, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Lucy.
Thanks. Bye. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.